Hello. The IRS is sitting on over $1 trillion in unpaid taxes. And every dollar of those unpaid taxes is an opportunity for someone who specializes in tax representation. Now, the only question is that someone? You. Welcome to Inside the Tax Representation Vault, where we examine this tax representation industry because it's so lucrative. I am Nafisa Manera, your tax attorney CEO who rescues businesses and individuals from tax debt and trains the next generation of attorneys, CPAs, and EAs to do the same. I'm excited that you decided to join me today to this new segment that we're going to be starting because we want to look inside this tax representation industry and give you the real on what's going on and how you can benefit in this lucrative niche. So today what I want to talk about is number one, what's going on in this market. What is the market of tax representation? Why there are so few people who serve in this particular industry, and how you can get started on your path to become one who specializes in tax representation. First of all, what we're going to take a look at is 5 things today. We're going to look at 5 things. Number one, let's look at what is this $1 trillion IRS tax problem? Where does this number come from and why is it growing? Now, recently, the former Treasury Secretary, Larry Summers, said that over the next 10 years, the U.S. economy is going to lose over $1 trillion, right? It's going to lose over $1 trillion in uncollected tax debt. $1 trillion. Also, Natasha Sarin, who used to be she's a former counselor to the Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, who served, and she is a current professor of the Yale Law School, specializing in economics and economic law. She also stated that that number could go as high as 2.4 trillion over the next 10 years if underreporting and undercompliance continues to increase at its current rate. So this is what we're looking at. Over $1 trillion in unpaid taxes over the next 10 years. Let's look at where this number really comes from. And to understand that, you have to understand the tax gap, a term called the tax gap. Now, what is the tax gap? In its simplest terms, what it means is that it is the difference between what the IRS is owed and what they collect. That difference, that's the tax gap. That's the tax gap. Okay? And that gap is where the opportunity lies. That's where the opportunity lies in that gap. And let me show you, just so you can see, I want to share my screen so you can see how this is growing. Okay, let's see. Okay. All right, so I hope you can see my screen because I want to show you how since 2008, how this tax gap has grown. So this whole line here, if we're looking at 2008, this whole graph here, this represents the whole tax gap, right? And then this top up here, this is what has been collected for that particular period. Right? So you can see that there is a continual rise and continual increase every year. The tax gap is increasing. And the latest numbers that they have projected for 2022 is 696 billion, right? And of that, in terms of this part being the amount that they collected, 606 billion, right? So that represents unfiled tax returns that the IRS know that they should have filed based on other information that they had received. It is also based on those who have filed but have not paid, right? So this is where we were in 2022. So this just lets you know that that tax gap, that amount of uncollected taxes is growing each year. Okay, let me stop sharing my screen right there. So that's letting you know that that is the opportunity that the IRS is probably going to use to try to enforce, because they want to be able to collect that money. So they're going to try to enforce that, right? So what does that mean in terms of it growing? Now, in terms of it growing, we got to look at why it's growing. Well, there are several factors on why it's growing. One is just the economy on its own in America is growing. So that economic growth, of course, is going to mean that more people are making more money and more people are going to, or should be, right, captured in the tax rolls, right? And more people are going to owe more money. And also in this age of entrepreneurship and more people wanting to be entrepreneurs, stepping out into entrepreneurship, and more people who, even if they have a job, are establishing their side hustles or side businesses or part-time businesses, right? So this is also going to contribute to the increase in the tax gap, right? Some people may not file all their taxes, or if they do, they're going to unexpectedly owe because of these businesses that they have started. So that economic growth is also going to cause this tax gap to increase. Also, the complexity of it, right? We already know that the Internal Revenue Code is already complex, and we just recently passed, right? The one big beautiful tax bill under our President Trump, right? Which again adds more complexity to the tax system. And the more complex the tax system is, the less you're going to have people that voluntarily participate, and the more errors you're going to have as well. Okay. Not only that, but this underreporting is going to increase as you have an increase in entrepreneurship, because people are getting in business and they don't understand all the full aspects of business in terms of their reporting requirements, what they're supposed to do, how they're supposed to do it, right? To the degree they're supposed to do it, right? So this causes a lot of people to have tax debt, either not file or not file correctly and not pay. Right. So that's the underreporting that's going on. The second thing we want to look at is the IRS staffing and backlog issues that the IRS is having. Now we all know that the IRS laid off a lot of employees with the change in the new administration at the beginning of this year, right? So the IRS before that was on a hiring spree because they had gotten over $80 billion in additional money for their budget, right, from Congress for enforcement. So they were revving up, increasing the number of employees, but that budget, $80 billion budget, got cut back to 60 million. Right. And then with the change in administration, now you have people that are being laid off, which means what? The IRS are going to have less employees that's processing returns, that's dealing with issues, right? And the IRS already has a backlog. As of April of 2025, the IRS, I want to make sure I get my statistics correct. The IRS had a backlog of $3.4 million individual tax returns that had not been processed. And they had, as of July, they had 5.7 million paper tax returns that have not been processed. So you have 3.4 million individuals that hadn't been processed. And on top of that, you have 5.7 million paper tax returns which had not been processed. Not to mention the employee retention credit, which has been having so many problems since they instituted this after COVID, has had 1.4, oh no, let me make sure I'm correct, 1.2 million claims that are on backlog. So there is a severe backlog at the IRS, right? Which again is creating more problems and more opportunity for those who know how to take advantage of it, right? The third thing we want to look at is the underserved market. Now, when I say underserved, there's two aspects that we want to look at. We want to look at, number one, the demand. And as we just said, a lot of these inefficiencies and backlog and lack of staffing is going to contribute to a lot of the confusion and further backlog and further mistakes and errors. But the two things we want to look at under the underserved market is, number one, currently the IRS has more than 16 million businesses and individuals that are in the collection process. 16 million businesses and individuals are currently in the collection process. Okay. This is a huge demand. The second part of that is supply. Who's helping this 16 million? Who's helping the 16 million? Well, you have to remember that only attorneys, CPAs, and EAs can represent a taxpayer before the IRS. And even though there are more than 1.3 million attorneys, most do not practice tax. In fact, less than 0.05% are actually tax attorneys. So of the 1.3 million, only 0.05% are tax attorneys. And even though there are more than 1.4 million accountants, of that 1.4 million of accountants, only 650,000 are certified public accountants. And of that 650 of certified public accountants, only 0.04% practice tax representation work. Right? And there are over 87,000 enrolled agents. And not all enrolled agents practice tax representation work. In fact, there are less than 25,000 who have a CAF number. And a CAF number is just a central authorized file. It's just a number that you have to have if you're actually going to practice tax representation work. You have to have a CAF number. So just because you're an attorney, just because you're a CPA, just because you're an EA, that does not automatically mean that you're going to be able to practice tax representation work. You still have to get a CAF number. And only 25,000, less than 25,000 of enrolled agents have that. So what does this mean? There's not enough attorney CPAs and enrolled agents who practice this work to be able to meet the demand of helping over 16 million people who are in collections. The opportunity is ripe. The opportunity is ripe in this lucrative field, right? So let's take a look at number four. Number four is basically the income potential. Well, how much money can you make, Nafisa? What are we talking about here? Okay, what are we talking about here? I forgot to lock my got to lock my desk. Moving up and down. Okay, but let's look at the income potential. What we're talking about here now. The average fee um, retainer fee that you can get from a client. And for the most part, we operate on fixed fees. Okay, at least I know I operate on fixed fees, and mostly everybody I know who practice in this particular area, they operate on fixed fees. Can be anywhere from $3,500 to $10,000 or more, depending on the type of taxes involved and whether you're doing federal and state and the number of taxes that are involved. Okay. The average client is generally somewhere around $6,500. And that's because not only are you looking at tax representation work, but you're looking at somebody might have unfiled returns. You might look at different issues that you might have to resolve before you can even get to resolving their actual tax debt, right? So that's $6,500. There's income potential in that, right? And depending on what type of clients you have, right? Because you can specialize in the construction industry, you can specialize in the restaurant industry, you can specialize with real estate agents, right? And the trucking industry. There's several different industries or particular types of clients that you can specialize in, which will affect your average fee, your typical fee that you charge. Okay. Another thing we want to look at is the lifestyle factor. Because as I told you before, right? The lifestyle factor. Number one, you can do a lot of this work remotely. You don't have to have an office. You can if you want to, but so much of the exchange between you and your client is electronically, it's paperless, right? So you can do this work remotely. You can do it from anywhere as long as you have a Wi-Fi connection. It's flexible because you can set up your own hours, right? You can have weekend hours if you want to, only work 2 or 3 days a week. And it doesn't take many clients. At 6,500, how many clients do you need per month to equal the income that your full-time income that you might have by working for another firm? And the variety, because as I said before, remember, you can work with all types of clients in all types of industries who have tax debt problems. And let me just tell you, like I had a case, one of my earlier cases involved a nonprofit. And this nonprofit was a nonprofit that was geared toward offering services for youth, and they had gotten a lot of grants and money and stuff like that. So they had been operating, but because they were fairly new, they got into trouble with payroll taxes. They got behind in the filing and payment of their payroll taxes, and they ended up owing over $99,000 in payroll taxes, right? So when they came to me, we had to get all that cleared up, to get them current with filing their payroll tax returns, right? With getting current on their payroll tax returns. Current, we know they had some past that, but trying to get current, right? Because they were still operating at the time. And we were able to submit an OIC for this particular client because they did not have the money, right? They had lost, they didn't get some grants renewed and that type of thing. So they did not have the money to pay. And we ended up, my fee for that was about $7,800, right? Because Not only did they have payroll tax issues, because this was due to payroll tax, federal IRS payroll tax issues, but they had state payroll tax issues as well. So we had to resolve both of those. And we ended up doing an OIC for the IRS for $1,700. So from 99,000 to $1,700. Yeah, I mean, that client was very happy, very relieved of us, very appreciative of the fact that we saved them all that money, right? Now that nonprofit eventually did shut down because they were not able to get continuing funding, but they did not have that over them, that $99,000 bill hanging over them. So that's just a small example of what you can do in terms of having income and impact in this particular industry. So if you're a tax pro, okay, make sure I covered everything on here. Yeah, so if you're a tax professional who's an attorney, CPA, or enrolled agent, you may be closer than you think to your ideal income, impact, and lifestyle choices, work-life balance. And what you can do, you could slowly start to learn this on your own, just by learning one tool at a time. Studying OIC, offer and compromise, and just learning that. Then after you get that down, you can go to installment agreements and you get that down and understand everything, you get that, and so on, to be able to educate yourself and train yourself in this lucrative specialty. And if you don't want to do that on your own, I offer a 7-week course where I train attorneys, CPAs, and enrolled agents to do the same. So if you want some help, look me up. I'm Nafisa Manera, your tax attorney CEO. And you can find me at taxroadmapusa.com. Thank you for so much for joining us inside the Tax Representation Vault. Bye.